We're going to talk about a self-proclaimed psychic detective,
Oh.
Dorothy Allison. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's been involved with over 5,000 cases of either unsolved murders or missing children. So she seemed to have more psychic ability when it came to children, especially missing children, that she helped the police with. And she helped solve around a dozen murders and located more than 50 missing children.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Go for it.
It's been her all along.
You reckon she's some sort of
Yeah.
serial?
She's a serial killer. I mean,
serial abductor.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So there you go.
Solved.
Next. So, May 15th, 1976, a 14-year-old. Oh, is that when he was born again?
Just I wasn't born again. I've always been born in 76.
Goodness. A 14-year-old Susan Jacobson left her home in Staten Island to go to a job interview at her local ice cream parlor. And when she didn't return home that evening, her parents, Bill and Ellen, called the police to report her missing. They told Bill and Ellen that Susan had probably just run away with her boyfriend and that they wasn't going to waste police resources looking for her. They assumed that she'd left with her boyfriend at the time, and he was 16-year-old Dempsey Hawkin.
That's a cool name.
Dempsey Hawkin. Pretty cool. The pair had met the summer before when Susan was 13 and Dempsey was 15. They very quickly fell in love and they became inseparable. So they had like a summer romance. The Dempsey was smart and handsome, and Susan's parents really liked him and they thought they were a really good match. Until 6 months later, when Susan, who was now 14, became pregnant.
Uh-oh.
So in the January after they'd met in 1976, Susan's parents arranged for her to go and have an abortion, and they told Suzanne that they thought it would be best if she stopped seeing Dempsey. They thought that they'd become too close and that it was now a distraction for Suzanne, that she wasn't focusing on her school, and obviously she had the pregnancy and things, so she thought that Dempsey was a bad influence on her. Susan did not agree. So the pair continued to date until her disappearance in May. And despite claims that the police had said that Susan had run away with her boyfriend, Dempsey wasn't missing. So I don't know why they would think that, but they refused to search for her even after the allocated time that a child is missing. They would normally go, oh, she's been missing for 24 hours, we'll send out a search
How old
party.
was she again?
She was 14.
14, and they're not going to search for her, even if she had run away with, well, I don't know, I suppose in 1976 maybe the laws were a little bit, well, maybe very different.
But their words to her parents were, we don't have the resources all the time and we're not going to waste them looking for a runaway child.
Oh, they may as well have just said we can't be bothered.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Yeah,
that's not what we're here for.
You can't make us. Yeah.
What do you think we get paid to do?
Yeah.
So as any parent would do, Bill and Ellen decided to take the search into their own hands. And with the help of friends, family, neighbours and Dempsey, they searched for Suzanne. After weeks of searching with no leads or signs of Susan, Bill and Ellen enlisted the help of self-proclaimed psychic detective Dorothy Allison, who they'd heard about because of her reputation and the fact that she was able to find missing children. So Dorothy agreed to help the family, and she drove down to Staten Island, and she knew very minor details about Susan's disappearance. They hadn't really given her many sort of clues or anything to go on. As soon as Dorothy arrived at the home, she asked Ellen, so Susan's mum, if the numbers 2562 meant anything to them. And Ellen said, I was really confused, and it took her a little while to sort of process what the numbers could mean. And she said, the only thing that I could think of was that Susan's birthday was the 5th of February, 1962.
Oh.
Dorothy
that
then
makes sense.
Yeah. Dorothy then asked Ellen if the numbers 408 or 405 meant anything. Susan had been born at 4:05 a.m. on that day. So next, Dorothy said that she could see the letters M-A-R. She said, really clearly, I could see these letters, M-A-R. And she said the parents, bring me this. And they was like, well, we don't know what it is. So they had no idea what she was talking about. And so she had a lot of these sort of really random visions that kind of didn't mean anything to the parents. She said that she could see an abandoned car, that she could see 2 church steeples and 2 smokestacks in the distance somewhere. And she could see a large rock with these letters, so spray painted in red, these letters M-A-R on this large rock. And she said that she was getting a strong smell of oil, and that she felt like she was surrounded by marshland or swampland, and that she could see the numbers 222. So she was throwing out all of these visions that she was having to the parents, and they had no idea what she any of them meant. But then she said that she had a vision that Susan's boyfriend, Dempsey, had strangled her and dumped her body. And she felt that what she was seeing were clues to the location of Susan's body. So she urged the Jacobsons to go to the police with all of this new information and the clues of where she could possibly be, and the fact that she'd been missing for so long now, a good couple of weeks. She urged them to go to the police to see if they would do anything. But the police didn't trust the help of a psychic and told Bill and Ellen that it was all nonsense. So they still did not help in the search. So Bill decided to gather up all these clues that Dorothy had given him and begin the search again to see if he could possibly find where all of these things would be. And he said it took him a few months, but he finally found an old World War I shipyard, and it was called Downback, and it was just this abandoned shipyard. And it was quite a large area. But once he started searching it, he came across a very large rock with, in red spray paint, the letters M-A-R. So right by this rock, there was an abandoned car. And all around was marshy swampland. So he knew that he was searching the right area.
The right place, didn't he? Blimey.
The problem was it was a massive area. So despite the fact that he'd found these clues that Dorothy had given him, he knew that he was looking in the right area. They didn't find Susan.
Oh.
So it would actually take 2 years from the date that she went missing for her body to be found. A group of teenage boys were out playing, and they found 2 oil drums down a 12-foot hole. And when they looked inside one of the barrels, they saw what they thought was animal bones, until one of the boys noticed some shoes and clothing beside the barrels. So they immediately called the police. And then standing in the spot where the oil drums were, where her body was, you could see in the distance 2 church steeples and 2 smokestacks. And the oil drum where Susan's body was located had the numbers 222 on it. Susan's body showed signs that she'd been strangled and then stuffed into this oil barrel and then dumped into a swampy, water-filled hole.
Isn't it amazing, though, how you can find a body all that time later and still be able to work out that they were strangled?
I think it's because strangulation
it breaks that
hyoid bone, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's crazy though, isn't it? How they can tell all of that, and this is how they died, and yeah, I think it's really clever.
Yeah, but it's a good thing.
Yeah. It's sad. It's really sad that was the end for a 14-year-old girl. That's really sad, isn't it?
So now that they
have got a cool name anymore.
No, we don't know that it was him. Just because Dorothy said so.
She
did say. So now that they had her body, the police began questioning Susan's then boyfriend, Dempsey Hawkin, who was now 18. He denied having anything to do with her murder, but was eventually found guilty and sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Good.
He did eventually admit to killing her, saying that Susan had tried to end their relationship, like her parents had suggested. She tried to end their relationship, but Dempsey, he said, I just couldn't allow that to happen. So he lured her to this abandoned shipyard and he strangled her with her own shirt and then dumped her body, or just tried to conceal it in the oil barrels and then dumped it down this big hole. And he said that he'd helped with the search, more so that he could hinder the search and throw off any suspicions that it was him. So in an interview that I watched with Susan's dad, she said that every time they kind of got anywhere that Dempsey thought was kind of close to the location, he would throw them off and he would be like, oh, there's something over there. He would kind of lead them away all the time. So he was really sort of inhibited the search for her, but they didn't think anything of it at the time because they had no suspicions that it was him at all.
I hope he got more time for that.
He got 22 years. He wasn't released. I think he ended up serving 37 years, but he was born in England and then lived in America most of his life. So when he was released, he was deported back to England. So I think he's out now. I think he got out in 2017. But I think he didn't get a very long sentence because he would have been 16 at the time of the murder. Don't know why that makes a difference, but it does.
I suppose if he's like over here, isn't it? If you're under 18, you're not tried. You're not tried as an adult. You're tried as a
minor.
Yeah.
So yeah, he got sentenced to 20 years, but I think he ended up serving more than that. But yeah, so although Dorothy's visions hadn't led police to Susan's location or the killer straight away, all the clues were there. Yeah. So everything that she said, and if the police had have listened to Dorothy and had have began the search based on these clues, she could have been found much sooner. So everything that she said was pretty much spot on. The big rock with the letters MAR, the fact that she'd been strangled by her boyfriend. I mean,
that's really specific, isn't it? Like
very specific.
The towers in the background, the rock, the letters,
the smell of oil,
the numbers on the barrel. Yeah, that's very specific.
Very, very specific. But there's also other cases where Dorothy had these visions that were pretty spot on. So although she'd I said in the beginning that she'd helped locate 50 missing children and helped solve a certain amount of murders, like more than a dozen murders. These were the other ones I'm going to talk about now are visions that she'd had that was spot on, but they didn't lead to to finding a missing person or anything. They're just visions that she'd had. So in 1967, she had a vision of a blue-eyed, blonde-haired boy in a green snowsuit with his shoes on the wrong feet, and that he drowned in a pond and his body was stuck in a drain pipe. So Dorothy had this vision and she called the police and informed them about this little boy. And 2 months later, a missing boy with blonde hair and blue eyes had been found in a drain pipe wearing a green snowsuit with his shoes on the wrong feet. So although her vision didn't necessarily lead to him being found or stopping it from happening, it was absolutely spot on. So she'd actually also given the police the location of where he'd drowned and the date that he would be found on.
No way.
Yeah, and they were all accurate. There was a lot of specifics that she said in this phone call about the date that he'd be found, about this location, what she could see in the distance, what was nearby. She gave the description of him was spot on, down to the clothing that he was wearing, and he'd had this little pin on underneath his snowsuit on his shirt, and she was even accurate as to him wearing this pin.
Oh.
So in 1974, John DeMars, and I think that's how you pronounce his name, he got on a train. He was a businessman that got on a train and then he disappeared. And it's quite a famous case. and I'd heard of it before, but I didn't realise Dorothy Allison was involved in this as well. So we'd gotten on a train and he'd completely disappeared, and there were a lot of rumours about his disappearance. There was a lot of conspiracy theories about what had happened. But there were absolutely no clues as to what had happened. So the police actually called Dorothy and asked her for help.
The police called her?
The police called her, yeah. These are all in different locations. All of these happened in different locations. So she said that the man, so John DeMars, had fallen from the train, that he'd gotten off the train at what he thought was his stop, but he'd fallen into water. She said that she saw a bow and arrow and thought that that had something to do with his death. And she said she saw the numbers 222.
Oh, again.
So John DeMars' body was actually found 3 months later on the 22nd of February, 222, by a father and son that were out shooting their bow and arrow into a river.
God. So
one of the arrows had gone awry and had landed somewhere by this rock, and they'd gone to go and collect this arrow, and that's where they found his body. So I'm not actually too sure what happened to John DeMars, but this is what I found. So it's very different over here to how I think it works over there. But he'd fallen asleep on the train, and then woke up in a panic, thinking that he was at his stop. So when the train stopped, he got up, and in his sleepy state, he got off the train, but the train had stopped on a like a bridge.
Yeah.
He'd got off and he'd fallen straight off the train into a river below, and he'd drowned. Which baffles me, because you can't open a train door unless they're stopped at the designated stops here. So I don't know how it works.
Yeah, it wasn't that wasn't even the case when I was younger. You could easily just open the doors.
Oh, could you really?
Yeah.
That's why I was so confused, because I was like, how could you just open the door when it's on a
Yeah, we used to, like, they were just sort of normal door, heavyweight, but you could just turn the handle and open the door if the train was moving. There was no alarms, or there wasn't the sliding electric doors or anything like that.
Oh, okay, so that makes more sense then. So that's what had happened. So in his sleepy state, he thought he'd panicked. He thought that he was at his stop, and he opened the door and he stepped off and stepped straight off the train, straight into the river, and drowned. So,
and he was young, right? You said
he was a businessman.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I've got confused with the young boy. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Sorry. In 1991, police contacted Dorothy to help solve the murder of the 13-year-old girl. And Dorothy said that they contact Dorothy out of the blue, and she doesn't know these cases, and she doesn't live in the area, so she doesn't pick up any information of what's going on. But she said that she thought the name Brown was important in the case of this 13-year-old girl, and that it wouldn't be spelt in the normal way. And she said that the man that had taken her or murdered her had an issue with his leg, and thought that he walked with a limp. Robert Charles Brown, with an E, was later arrested and convicted of her murder. And he did also walk with a limp, it turned out. I don't know what happened to his leg. But so there's plenty of cases that police had contacted Dorothy for her help also, where she'd provided plenty of clues, an abundance of clues, and they all turned out to be nothing, or misleading, or just no help at all. So my issue is this a case of genuine psychic ability, or just the ability to pick out details and that can be interpreted in a way that fits the case? So if you have enjoyed this story, if you have any stories very similar, or if you've got any experiences yourself, please do let us know, because I think the more I hear about it, the more I'll get on board.
Yeah, no, we definitely want to hear from you guys, and we really want to keep our our listeners going and our downloads up, and we had a phenomenal day last week where, you know, we received 117 downloads in one day, which was epic. So if we can keep that going, that would be amazing.
Yes, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.